The clock is ticking. Iran has until April 6th to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or face the most concentrated display of American firepower assembled in the Middle East in a generation. 3 aircraft carrier strike groups, 23 strategic bombers already in theater, 5,000 Marines poised and ready, and a president who has publicly threatened to obliterate Iran's oil fields, power stations, and the crown jewel of its export economy, Kharg Island, unless Tehran backs down. This isn't posturing. The hardware is already there. The orders have already been drafted. And there are details about what America is prepared to do, and exactly how it plans to do it, that have barely made it into the mainstream coverage. We're going to walk you through all of it. To understand where we are right now, you have to understand what Iran actually did to the Strait of Hormuz, and why the United States has reached the point of issuing an ultimatum with a specific calendar date attached to it. According to reporting by the Washington Institute, Iran didn't just blockade the strait in the traditional sense. Tehran constructed what analysts are calling a selective tolling regime, a system where Iran's own oil tankers and those of a handful of preferred partners pass through freely, while vessels belonging to Western-aligned nations are denied access unless they pay what amounts to a protection fee. More than 20 ships have been attacked in and around Hormuz since the conflict escalated. And according to CNN, approximately 2,000 vessels are now trapped inside the Persian Gulf, unable to exit. The economic implications of that number are almost impossible to overstate. On March 26th, President Trump announced on Truth Social that he was extending the deadline for strikes on Iranian power infrastructure to April 6th, citing negotiations that he described as proceeding, in his words, very well and effectively. NPR confirmed the extension, noting that Pakistan has been serving as a quiet back-channel intermediary between Washington and Tehran, with Iran reportedly presenting 5 conditions for a ceasefire. But as CBS News reported in its live updates, Iran has simultaneously rejected direct negotiations, a contradiction that the White House has not publicly reconciled. What Secretary of State Marco Rubio said publicly, however, left very little room for ambiguity. Speaking to reporters, Rubio declared Hormuz will be open again one way or another. Either Iran agrees to comply with international law, or a coalition of nations will force it open. Those aren't the words of a diplomat trying to preserve diplomatic space. That's a countdown. And according to CNBC, Trump went further. He threatened the complete obliteration of Iranian power plants' oil wells, and specifically Kharg Island, the offshore terminal that handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. The Washington Institute has described Kharg Island as Iran's economic Achilles heel. If it burns the Islamic Republic's ability to fund its military, its proxy networks, and its government apparatus essentially collapses. Iran knows this. And that knowledge is precisely what makes the next few days so extraordinarily dangerous. But the ultimatum itself is only one layer of the story. What America has quietly assembled in and around the theater in terms of raw destructive capability is another story entirely. And this is where things get really serious for Tehran. The air campaign, what 23 bombers actually mean. Let's start with what is happening right now at RAF Fairford in the English countryside, because it is genuinely unprecedented. According to Air and Space Forces magazine, the United States has concentrated 15 B-1B Lancers and 8 B-52H Stratofortresses at that single Royal Air Force base as of early April 2026. To put that in perspective, 15 B-1Bs represent more than 1/3 of the entire operational B-1 fleet. This is not a rotation. This is a massing. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on March 5th, as reported by Air and Space Forces magazine, that operations were about to surge dramatically, referencing more squadrons, more defensive capability, and more frequent bomber strike packages. He was not exaggerating. The B-52s have already done something in this campaign that before Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th would have seemed almost inconceivable. They have flown directly over Iranian airspace, dropping Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAM's GPS-guided bombs, delivered from altitude with clinical precision. The war zone reported that B-52s have also employed the AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, known as JASSM, from outside Iranian airspace, entirely meaning American bombers can reach targets deep inside Iran without ever entering the range of whatever surface-to-air missile coverage Tehran has left. The fact that B-52s are now operating directly over Iran with JDAMs as Air and Space Forces magazine confirmed tells you everything you need to know about the state of Iran's integrated air defense network. It has been, for all practical purposes, shattered. Al Jazeera's cameras were at RAF Fairford on March 12th and filmed bunker-busting bombs being loaded directly onto B-1B Lancers. Not a simulation. Not a training exercise. Live ordnance being loaded onto aircraft that were about to take off for Iran. The message that imagery sent to Tehran was deliberate. And then there is the GBU-72. On March 17th, CENTCOM confirmed the employment of multiple GBU-72 bunker-busting munitions, each weighing 5,000 pounds, against underground cruise missile storage facilities and subterranean anti-ship missile batteries along Iran's coastline near the strait. These are not weapons designed to damage a building. They are designed to travel through meters of hardened concrete and reinforced earth before detonating. Iran spent years and billions of dollars building hardened underground infrastructure specifically to survive American air power. The GBU-72 exists specifically to destroy that assumption. We'll explain exactly what comes next in the bomber campaign in a moment. But first, there's a second dimension to this operation that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The naval dimension, 3 carriers and what each one represents. On March 31st, the USS George H.W. Bush departed Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia, accompanied by a strike group that includes 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each equipped with the Aegis combat system. Bloomberg confirmed that a 3rd American carrier strike group is now heading toward the Middle East, estimating a transit time of roughly 3 weeks. This means that within the April 6th window, the United States will not yet have all 3 carrier groups on station simultaneously. But the USS Abraham Lincoln is already in theater, and it is operating with devastating effectiveness. What complicates the picture, and what American planners are not advertising, is that the USS Gerald R. Ford was forced to withdraw from the combat zone after a shipboard fire on March 12th, according to Army recognition. The Ford was the most advanced carrier in the fleet. Its absence matters. But the Lincoln is carrying the operational load, and the Bush is en route. By late April, if this conflict is still unresolved, the United States will have a 3-carrier presence that will be the most powerful naval force assembled in the Persian Gulf since the Gulf War. General Dan Kane announced that the United States has deployed a 10 Thunderbolt IIs specifically to hunt and destroy Iranian fast attack boats and swarm craft. The A-10 is not a glamorous aircraft by 21st century standards, but in the specific tactical environment of a narrow strait, crowded with small, fast, highly maneuverable attack vessels. It is arguably the most efficient weapon in the American inventory. Its GAU-8 Avenger cannon can put 30mm depleted uranium rounds through a fiberglass speedboat at a rate that leaves very little to the imagination. Alongside the A-10's Apache AH-64 attack helicopters have been deployed to handle Iran's one-way attack drones, unmanned aircraft that Iran has been using in significant numbers to harass shipping and complicate American air defense planning. But before we get to that, this is a quick reminder that you're watching the Hormuz Chokepoint. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. So hit subscribe to ensure you stay ahead of the curve. Iran's asymmetric strategy, the mines, the spoofing, and the psychological war. Now here is the part that keeps American naval planners awake at night. Because Iran is not trying to defeat the United States Navy in a conventional engagement. Tehran knows that fight is unwinnable. What Iran is doing with considerable tactical sophistication is making the strait ungovernable. And there is a meaningful difference between those two things. According to CBS News, American intelligence has confirmed that at least a dozen Iranian naval mines, specifically the Maham 3 and Maham 7 variants, are currently deployed inside the Strait of Hormuz. These are not crude contact mines from a century ago. They are influence mines designed to detect the acoustic signature magnetic field and pressure wave of a passing vessel before detonating. Clearing them requires a methodical, time-consuming minesweeping operation with specialized vessels. You cannot bomb your way through a minefield. CENTCOM has struck over 9,000 Iranian targets and flown over 9,000 combat sorties since the war began, including attacks on more than 140 Iranian naval vessels, according to CBS News. And yet the mines remain, because clearing mines is fundamentally different from destroying missiles. The electronic warfare dimension is arguably even more alarming for commercial shipping. According to Radio Free Europe/Radio Liberty, Iran's GPS spoofing and signal jamming operations affected over 1,650 vessels in a single day, causing navigational systems on supertankers to display their position as being on dry land. Think about what that means for a vessel the length of 3 football fields, navigating a channel that is at its narrowest, only 21 miles wide. The spoofing doesn't sink ships. It doesn't need to. It creates chaos insurance liability and the perception which RFE/RL's analysis describes as entirely deliberate, that the strait has become an uncontrollable environment. Shipping companies don't need to be attacked. They just need to believe the risk is too high. That belief, manufactured and sustained, is costing the global economy hundreds of millions of dollars per day. Colonel Williams, interviewed by RFE/RL, was blunt about what this means operationally. There is no easy military solution for reopening Hormuz, he said. The geography favors the defender. Iran's coastline runs along the entire northern edge of the strait. Its missile batteries, fast boats, and mine-laying capabilities can be suppressed, but not eliminated entirely. Not without a sustained and costly combined arms campaign that would take weeks, not days. And this is where things start to shift in a way that Washington is clearly not comfortable discussing publicly. The 4 core objectives of Epic Fury and where they stand. Secretary Rubio laid out 4 core objectives for Operation Epic Fury when the campaign launched on February 28th, according to Crisis Group. First, destroy Iran's air force. Second, eliminate Iran's navy. Third, degrade Iran's ballistic and cruise missile launch capability. Fourth, destroy Iran's missile and drone manufacturing infrastructure. By any honest accounting, the United States has made extraordinary progress on objectives 1, 2, and 3. B-52s flying directly over Iranian territory with JDAMs is as definitive a proof of air superiority as exists. CENTCOM's confirmed strike count of over 9,000 targets, including more than 140 naval vessels, speaks for itself on Objective 2. The GBU-72 strikes on underground missile storage facilities represent tangible progress on Objective 3. Objective 4, the manufacturing infrastructure is harder to assess from open sources. Iran has reportedly dispersed much of its drone and missile production capability into hardened or concealed facilities, some of them located in populated areas that create significant legal and political complications for targeting decisions. This is not a coincidence. Iran's military doctrine has always incorporated civilian infrastructure as a form of deterrence against Western air power. It is a cynical strategy. It has also historically been at least partially effective. What comes next, depending on what happens on April 6th, could change everything. Here is the strategic reality that frames the April 6th deadline. According to a Time magazine report citing White House sources, reopening the Strait of Hormuz is not in fact a core objective for ending the war on the American side. The White House signaled in late March that Trump does not require Hormuz to be fully reopened as a condition for declaring the conflict concluded. That is a significant admission, and Iran's negotiators, if the Pakistan-mediated back channel is real, will have noticed it. What it tells us is that the April 6th deadline is almost certainly a lever in an ongoing negotiation, not an iron trigger for automatic escalation. But levers work only as long as the threat behind them is credible. And that credibility has been established beyond any reasonable doubt by everything the United States has done over the past 5 weeks. Iran is in a desperate position. Its air force has been functionally destroyed. Its conventional navy has been devastated. Its underground military infrastructure is being penetrated by 5,000-pound penetrating munitions. Its GPS spoofing and mine campaign has bought time and psychological space, but it has not stopped the bombing. And now, a third American carrier strike group is underway, meaning that by late April, the United States will have more firepower in the Persian Gulf than at any point in this conflict. Tehran faces a brutal calculus. Accept a negotiated settlement that requires opening the strait and foregoing the tolling regime it spent months constructing, or hold out and risk the destruction of Kharg Island and the power generation infrastructure that keeps Iranian cities functional. The 5 conditions Iran presented to Pakistani intermediaries, as reported by NPR, suggest that some faction within the Iranian government wants a way out. Whether that faction has the institutional power to impose a decision on the Revolutionary Guard is right now the single most important unknown in the entire conflict. What happens after April 6th, whatever happens, will define the shape of this war for months. For more on the weapons and tactics shaping this campaign, find out more in our video on the B-1B Lancer's role in Operation Epic Fury, and what the GBU-72 means for Iran's underground military infrastructure. Both videos are on the channel now. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Hormuz Chokepoint to see more of our coverage of Operation Epic Fury. And thank you as always for watching.